Welcome back to Flagstone Trail, our deep dive into Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. Today
we are tackling Law 14.
Law 14.
Pose as a friend.
What?
Work as a spy.
I'm already feeling a little sneaky.
Well, it's not about being a spy, in the traditional sense.
Right.
It's about understanding that information.
Okay.
And particularly the kind of information that people try and keep hidden.
Yes.
Can be a very potent form of power.
So it's not just about what people are telling us outright, but what they're kind of unintentionally revealing.
Exactly. Think about it like in the context of, say, a workplace.
Okay.
Most people, especially in competitive environments, are guarded. They don't want to show weakness. They don't necessarily want to reveal their true intentions.
Yeah, because doing so could leave them vulnerable.
Exactly.
If everybody knows your next move, they can easily outmaneuver you.
Precisely. But if you can glean insights into what others are thinking, what their motivations are, what their next move might be,
then you gain a significant advantage.
Huge advantage.
You can anticipate challenges.
Yes.
Make more informed decisions.
Absolutely.
Even subtly influence outcomes.
Greene illustrates this beautifully with the story of Joseph Duveen.
Yes.
The art dealer extraordinaire.
The guy who sold all the priceless masterpieces to the millionaires.
That's
not exactly our average office scenario.
True, but the principles at play
Right.
are surprisingly universal.
Right.
So Duveen wanted to sell to Andrew Mellon, incredibly wealthy, but notoriously difficult client.
Difficult how?
Mellon had a reputation for being very shrewd and skeptical of charming salesmen.
So how did he manage to break through that icy exterior?
By being a master of subtle intel.
Okay.
So Duveen spent years building a network of informants.
Oh, wow.
Learning everything he could about Mellon.
Like what?
His tastes, his habits, even his travel plans.
He was really playing the long game.
The long game.
Wow.
And it all culminated in that chance encounter in the lift.
Yes.
At Claridge's hotel.
That story still makes me chuckle.
It's a classic.
Yes.
Knowing that Mellon was headed to the National Gallery, Duveen just orchestrated a seemingly accidental meeting.
Right.
Engaged Mellon in conversation, mirroring his tastes.
Oh.
Subtly positioning himself as a kindred spirit.
And Mellon, none the wiser, walked away thinking, this Duveen chap, a man of discerning taste.
Exactly.
Little did he know he was being expertly played.
But that's the brilliance of this law.
Yeah.
It's not about brute force or overt manipulation.
Right.
It's about gathering information and using it to subtly position yourself to your advantage.
Okay, so we see how Duveen, the master art salesman, used it. But how do we apply this in a less, shall we say, theatrical setting?
Right.
Most of us aren't dealing with priceless Renoirs.
The principles remain the same.
Okay.
Take the workplace, for example.
Okay.
Don't just focus on your tasks. Observe the dynamics around you.
What kind of dynamics are we talking about?
Who holds influence? What are the unspoken rules?
Like understanding the company culture. What behaviors are rewarded or frowned upon?
Yes. And pay attention to the individuals.
Okay.
What motivates your colleagues?
Nah.
What are their strengths and weaknesses?
Right.
What are their aspirations?
And this isn't about being gossipy or malicious, right?
No.
This is about observation.
It's about connecting the dots.
Right.
Think of yourself as a social scientist.
Okay.
You're gathering data to better understand the ecosystem you're operating in.
Greene mentions the Talleyrand technique.
Yes.
Turning small talk into strategic intel. How does that work exactly?
Well, Talleyrand was a French diplomat.
Okay.
And he was a master at making people feel heard. He understood that people love to talk about themselves.
Oh, they do?
So he'd ask that these open-ended questions, listen intently, and use those seemingly innocuous conversations to extract valuable information.
So it's about being genuinely interested in others, but also recognizing that even casual conversations can reveal a lot about a person.
For sure.
Their priorities, their fears, their ambitions.
Precisely.
Right.
It's about reading between the lines.
Yeah.
So, for instance, let's say a colleague is constantly complaining about lack of recognition for their work.
Okay.
That tells you something right there.
It does.
About their motivations.
Yeah.
Crave validation.
So if you wanted to influence them, you might find ways to publicly acknowledge their contributions.
Exactly. You're speaking their language.
Oh.
You're addressing their core need.
Okay.
You've used that intel to build rapport and potentially gain an ally.
Okay. I'm starting to see how this can be powerful, even in seemingly mundane interactions. But we've talked a lot about gathering intel.
Right.
What about the other side of the coin? Protecting ourselves from being somebody else's pawn.
Ah, yes. The defensive aspect of Law 14.
Right.
This is where things get even more intriguing.
Because if we're trying to gather information, it's safe to assume that other people are doing the same to us.
It's a safe assumption.
Makes you look at every conversation a little differently.
It does, and that awareness is key.
Okay.
Green quotes Winston Churchill here.
Oh, yeah.
He said, "Truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies."
Oh, wow.
A bit dramatic, but the point is clear.
It is.
We need to be strategic about what we reveal.
Especially in competitive environments.
Exactly. Think of it like a poker game.
Okay.
You don't want your opponents to read your every tell.
Right.
You want to keep some cards close to your chest.
So how do we strike that balance between being open and approachable while also protecting ourselves from being exploited?
It's about discernment.
Okay.
Let's go back to the workplace example.
Right.
You're working on a promising project.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to broadcast every detail to all of your colleagues.
Especially if there are rivals who might try to undermine you or steal your ideas.
Exactly. Be selective about what you share.
Okay.
And with whom.
With whom?
And in your personal life,
yes,
be mindful of what you reveal.
Especially on social media.
Especially on social media.
Because you never know who might be watching or how they might use that information.
That's right.
It's a bit unsettling when you think about it.
It is. But awareness is power.
Okay.
And that's what Law 14 is all about.
Mm-hmm.
Becoming aware of the information game.
Okay.
Both as a player
right.
and as a potential target.
Okay. So we've covered gathering intel and protecting ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another layer to this law, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
Something about understanding people's character on a deeper level.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's not just about collecting facts and figures.
Mm-hmm.
It's about discerning people's true nature.
Okay.
Their motivations, their trustworthiness.
How do we do that?
Green uses the example of King Chosroes II,
Okay.
who had a rather cunning way of testing loyalty.
The story where he would plant false information to see who had spilled the beans.
Exactly.
Talk about high stakes.
It was a risky strategy, but incredibly effective.
And how?
By creating these tests, he could weed out those who were truly loyal
right.
from those who were merely pretending.
So how do we apply this in a less, monarchical setting?
Right.
It's not like we're going to be accusing our coworkers of treason.
Of course not.
Right.
But we can pay attention to how people behave under pressure.
Okay.
Do they gossip?
Mm-hmm.
Do they betray confidences? Do they take responsibility for their actions?
These are all clues to their character.
Exactly.
And once we have that information, we can make more informed decisions about who to trust, who to confide in, and who to be wary of.
It's like building your own personal trust radar.
Okay.
You're learning to assess not just what people say, but what their actions reveal about their true nature.
Okay, this is fascinating stuff. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
But I'm curious to hear more about specific examples of how to apply Law 14 in everyday life.
Okay.
Because it's one thing to understand the theory.
Yes.
But how do we actually put it into practice?
Let's dive into that next.
Fine.
You know what strikes me about this whole pose as a friend, work as a spy idea?
What?
It can feel a little ethically ambiguous.
Right.
Like, are we encouraging people to be manipulative?
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to feel like they're constantly being scrutinized or used.
Right.
But the Green's point is that we're already all playing this information game, whether we're conscious of it or not.
That's true.
Yeah.
Every interaction has that element of observation, of trying to figure out the other person's motives, even if it's subconscious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Law 14 is really about bringing that process to the forefront.
Yes.
Making it deliberate.
Making it deliberate.
And using it strategically.
And crucially, using it ethically. Because like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill.
Okay, so let's talk about the ethical application of this law.
Okay.
Let's say you're starting a new job.
Okay.
How can you use Law 14 to navigate that environment without coming across, as well, a creep?
Right. You don't want to be that person lurking in the shadows taking notes on everyone's coffee orders.
Right.
It's much more subtle than that.
So where do we begin?
Start by observing the dynamics.
Okay.
Who are the key players? What are the unspoken rules?
Okay.
Is the culture collaborative or competitive?
What matters to the boss? Is it punctuality, creativity, taking initiative?
Yes.
Once you understand that, then you can tailor your own behavior accordingly.
Precisely. And as you do engage in those seemingly casual conversations, listen more than you speak. What are people's frustrations? What are their goals? Where are the potential landmines?
Okay, so let's say you overhear a colleague complaining that projects always seem to get bogged down by endless meetings. And you've noticed that your boss values efficiency above all else. It's a valuable piece of intel.
Right.
You can use that knowledge to position yourself strategically. Perhaps you come up with a way to streamline the project workflow?
Yeah.
Or suggest alternative ways to communicate that don't involve lengthy meetings.
You're not being manipulative.
Right.
You're using your observations to address a real need within the team.
Yeah.
And in a way that aligns with what the boss values.
Right.
You're playing the game smartly.
Okay, so that's the workplace. But what about applying Law 14 in our personal relationships?
Right.
It feels a bit weird to think about spying on our friends or loved ones.
It can.
Right.
And I want to be clear, this is not about being suspicious or distrustful of everyone you meet.
Of course.
Healthy relationships are built on trust.
But even in the strongest relationships, there can be misunderstandings.
Yeah.
Unspoken needs.
And miscommunications.
And that's where Law 14, applied ethically, can actually help us strengthen those relationships.
Sure.
So it's about becoming more attuned to the subtle cues.
Yes.
The things that are left unsaid.
Exactly. Pay attention to your partner's moods, their body language.
Right.
The things that they say and don't say.
Because sometimes what's not being said is just as important as what is being said.
Absolutely.
Right.
For example, let's say your partner seems stressed that they're not opening up about what's bothering them.
Instead of badgering them with questions which might just make them defensive, we observe. Maybe they're working late, snapping at the kids, haven't been sleeping well.
Those are all valuable clues.
Right.
And instead of jumping in with solutions, you can simply acknowledge their stress.
Yeah.
Say something like, hey, I've noticed you seem a bit overwhelmed lately. Is there anything I can do to help?
You're demonstrating empathy and support without being intrusive.
Yep.
And you're creating a safe space for them to open up if they choose to.
You're using your observation skills to deepen the connection, not to manipulate or control. That's the ethical application of Law 14 in a personal relationship.
Okay, so we've got the workplace personal relationships. What about dealing with those, shall we say, difficult personalities we all encounter from time to time?
Yes, the energy vampires.
The ones who seem to thrive on conflict or drama.
These can be particularly tricky to navigate.
Our instinct is often to either confront them head on, which can backfire, or avoid them completely, which just lets them win.
Right.
So how does Law 14 help us find that middle ground?
It starts with understanding their game.
Okay.
What are their motivations? What are their insecurities? What are they trying to achieve?
Because once you see the pattern, you can disrupt it.
Exactly. Let's say you're dealing with a colleague who constantly undermines you in meetings.
They interrupt, dismiss your ideas, maybe even try to take credit for your work.
It's infuriating. Instead of getting dragged into their drama, observe their tactics and then counter them strategically. If they interrupt, politely but firmly say, I'd like to finish my thought. If they dismiss your ideas, back them up with data. If they try to take credit, document your contributions.
So it's about standing your ground without letting them dictate the terms of engagement.
Precisely. You're playing the game strategically, but with integrity.
And sometimes understanding their motivations can even allow you to turn the situation around.
Sometimes.
So.
Let's say you've observed that this colleague is deeply insecure about their own position in the company. Perhaps they feel threatened by your competence.
So instead of seeing them as the enemy, you see them as someone who's struggling.
Yeah.
That changes the whole dynamic.
And it opens up possibilities.
Yeah.
Maybe you publicly praise one of their ideas or find a way to collaborate with them on a project.
You're subtly reassuring them. Disarming them with kindness.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of Law 14 when used ethically. It's not about manipulation. It's about using your understanding of human nature to navigate complex situations with grace and intelligence.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of practical scenarios, the workplace, personal relationships, dealing with difficult people.
For sure.
But there's still that underlying question of ethics.
It's always there.
How do we ensure we're not crossing the line?
That's the crucial question, and I think it's one we need to explore further.
Okay.
Let's dive into that in our next segment.
All right, so we've delved into the strategies, the tactics of Law 14. But I think it's time to confront the elephant in the room.
Okay.
The ethical implications.
Right. It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
The very notion of posing as a friend, working as a spy, can sound downright Machiavellian.
It goes against our ingrained notions of honesty, authenticity being genuine.
Right.
That's right.
And yet we've also established that information is inherently powerful.
It is.
And that observing, understanding the motivations of others can be incredibly advantageous.
Yes. So how do we reconcile this apparent conflict between strategy and ethics?
I think it comes down to intent and execution.
Okay, unpack that for me.
So imagine you're at a networking event.
Okay.
You're meeting new people, exchanging pleasantries, observing body language, trying to gauge who might be a valuable contact.
That's pretty standard behavior, right?
I think so.
But we all do that to some extent.
We're constantly gathering information, processing it, making judgments, even if it's subconscious.
So in a sense, we're all spies to some degree.
To a degree.
We're just not necessarily aware of it.
Law 14 encourages us to become conscious of this process, to be deliberate about the information we gather and how we use it.
But here's the key question. To what end are we using this knowledge to build genuine connections or to manipulate and exploit others?
Right, that's the ethical line.
That's where the ethical line gets drawn. If your goal is to climb the ladder at any cost, to use people as stepping stones, then this law can be dangerous.
For sure.
But if your intent is to navigate complex social dynamics, to protect yourself from those who might seek to use you,
to understand the game,
then it becomes a tool for self-preservation.
It does.
For empowerment.
It's like that old saying, knowledge is power.
Right.
But it's the application of that knowledge that determines its ethical value.
I couldn't agree more.
Think of it like martial arts.
Okay.
You can use those skills to defend yourself or to become a bully.
Right.
It's all about the choices you make.
So how do we make sure we're using Law 14 for good? What are some practical guidelines we can follow?
First, be ruthlessly honest with yourself about your motivations. Why are you gathering this information? What do you intend to do with it?
If the answer is to harm others, to gain an advantage through deceit, then it's time to reevaluate your approach. But if your goal is to build genuine relationships, to understand the motivations of those around you, to navigate challenging situations with grace and intelligence.
Then Law 14 can be a powerful tool for personal and professional growth.
Another important consideration, I think, is discretion. Not all information is useful or actionable.
No, it's like being a detective. You sift through all the clues, you discard the irrelevant, and you focus on what truly matters.
And we need to be careful not to jump to conclusions. Or let gossip and hearsay cloud our judgment.
Absolutely. It's about being strategic, not impulsive, and always operating with integrity.
So it's not just about gathering information. It's about discerning what's valuable, what's ethical, and how to use it wisely.
I think the most important ethical guideline is to be mindful of the power dynamics at play. Law 14 can be especially dangerous when used against those who are already vulnerable or disadvantaged.
So, for example, using this law to exploit a coworker who's struggling, or to take advantage of a friend going through a tough time, that's not only unethical, it's cowardly.
True power comes from empowering others, not from exploiting their weaknesses.
If you find yourself in a position of authority, use your knowledge to mentor those who are junior to you. To create a more equitable and supportive environment.
Absolutely. Use your understanding of human nature to build bridges. Not to burn them.
And that, I think, is the ultimate lesson of Law 14.
I think so, too.
It's a powerful tool.
It is.
But it's up to us to wield it with wisdom, with compassion, and with a deep sense of responsibility.
It's about recognizing that true power lies not in manipulation or control, but in understanding, connection, and empathy.
And that's it for today's Flagstone Trail discussion.
Thank you for listening.
We appreciate your listenership.